I was just a boy trying to change everyone's life, so how did I become the man who finally did? I used to believe that saving people was about being a hero in a bright cape, but I learned the hard way that saving the people you love often means becoming the villain in their story until they are strong enough to understand what you did. My name is Leo, and at 28, I look back at my 18-year-old self and I barely recognize him. Growing up in our cramped, chaotic house, I was the master of blending in. My father, David, 56, was a man consumed by the slow, agonizing death of his hardware store. He was old school, the kind of man who thought working harder was the solution to a world that had moved on to working smarter. My mother, Elena, 54, was a woman whose entire identity was wrapped up in my older brother, Julian. Julian, 31, was the son our family orbited around. He was the athlete, the charmer, the one with the big ideas that always required just a little bit more of my parents' savings to get off the ground. Then there was Sophie, 22, the baby of the family, who was protected from every harsh reality. And then there was me. I was the wallpaper, I was the background noise. I was the one who fixed the leaking faucet while everyone else was arguing about dinner. I was the one who balanced the checkbook in my head while my father stared blankly at the pile of bills on the counter. I wanted so badly to change their lives. I wanted to shake my father and tell him his business model was 20 years out of date. I wanted to tell my mother that her blind faith in Julian was crippling him, not helping him. But whenever I tried to speak, I was met with a pat on the head or a dismissive wave. I was just a boy. What did I know about the real world? Have you ever seen the solution to a problem clearly, but no one would listen to you because you didn't have the status to be taken seriously? The realization that I couldn't save them as Leo the boy hit me on my high school graduation night. There was no party. My parents had forgotten to order a cake because Julian had been arrested for a DUI the night before, and the household funds had gone to a lawyer. I sat in my room, eating a bowl of cereal, and one realized that if I stayed in this house, I would drown with them. Their dysfunction was a whirlpool, and I was paddling in circles trying to keep everyone afloat. I made a decision that felt like a betrayal. I moved out the next week. I didn't go to college. There was no money for it, and I refused to take out loans I couldn't guarantee I could pay back. Instead, I rented a studio apartment above a mechanic's garage on the edge of town. It was 500 square feet of peeling paint and drafty windows, but it was mine. I took a job at a massive logistics distribution center, a warehouse that spanned 3 football fields. My shift was from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. It was brutal, physical work. My job was to optimize loading patterns for interstate trucks. It was essentially high-stakes Tetris with 50-pound boxes. My father was furious. He told me I was throwing my life away. He told me that manual labor was beneath the potential he thought I had, even though he had never nurtured that potential. But I wasn't just lifting boxes. I was observing. I was watching how goods moved across the country. I was seeing how the digital economy was dismantling brick-and-mortar stores like my father's. I saw the sheer volume of specialized tools and materials being shipped directly to consumers, bypassing the middleman. I realized that my father's store wasn't dying because people didn't need hammers. It was dying because he was waiting for them to walk in, while the rest of the world was shipping the hammer to their doorstep. For 5 years, I lived a double life that would have exhausted a marathon runner. By night, I was the invisible warehouse worker, earning a paycheck that I hoarded like a squirrel preparing for a nuclear winter. I ate rice and beans. I walked to work to save on gas. I wore my boots until the soles had holes in them. By day, while my family thought I was sleeping off my dead-end job, I was building my mind. I turned that tiny apartment into a command center. I taught myself Python to scrape data from supplier websites. I studied supply chain management through free online courses from MIT and Stanford. I read books on distressed asset management until the bindings fell apart. I started a small consultancy on the side, anonymously helping local businesses optimize their inventory. I didn't use my real name, I used a company handle. I was terrified that if my success had a face, specifically my face, people wouldn't trust it. I was still fighting the internal narrative that I was just a boy. The isolation was crushing. I missed birthdays. I missed holidays because I was working. My family interpreted my absence as indifference. My mother would leave voicemails crying, asking why I didn't care about them anymore. Julian would text me calling me a loser for working a night shift while he was networking at clubs. It hurt. It hurt physically to let them think I was a failure. But I knew that if I showed them my growing bank account, the money would disappear. Elena would give it to Julian for a new car. David would dump it into the store's debt without fixing the underlying rot. I had to let them think I was struggling so that I could secretly become strong enough to carry them when they inevitably collapsed. What would you do? Would you endure the judgment of your own family for years, knowing it was the only way to protect the resources needed to save them later? Watching my family from a distance was like watching a car crash in slow motion. Over those 5 years, things got bad. Really bad. Julian's ventures became more desperate. He got involved in a crypto scheme that wiped out my parents' retirement fund. Sophie dropped out of college because she couldn't afford the tuition, and she moved back home, sinking into a depression. My father's store was a ghost town. The roof was leaking, the inventory was dusty, and the few customers who came in left empty-handed because he didn't stock what they needed. He was taking out payday loans to cover payroll. He was aging rapidly, his skin turning a grayish hue, the spark in his eyes completely extinguished. I visited once a month. I would sit at the dinner table, listening to them complain about the economy, the government, the bad luck they had. I wanted to scream. I wanted to slam my fist on the table and tell them that luck had nothing to do with it. It was negligence. It was refusal to adapt. It was fear. But I stayed silent. I was the boy who listened. I was the boy who nodded. I was the boy who left early because he had to get back to the warehouse. I drove home those nights gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I was angry. I was angry that I had to sacrifice my youth, my social life, and my happiness to prepare for a disaster they were actively creating. I resented them. I resented that Julian got to be the beloved failure while I was the ignored success. But resentment is a fuel, if you know how to burn it cleanly. I took that anger and poured it into my work. I expanded my consultancy. I started buying small amounts of debt. I learned how bankruptcy proceedings worked. I prepared the legal frameworks. I was sharpening my sword in the dark, waiting for the beast to finally show its teeth. The call came on a Tuesday in November. It was Sophie. She was sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. They're locking the doors, Leo. The sheriff is here. Dad is on the floor. I didn't panic. I had rehearsed this moment in my head 1,000 times. I grabbed my laptop, my briefcase, and the folder I had labeled, Protocol 0. I drove to the house. It was worse than I thought. The hardware store had been seized earlier that day, and now the bank was serving the foreclosure notice on the family home because David had used the house as collateral for a predatory loan Julian had convinced him to sign. My father was sitting on the living room rug, staring at the wall. He looked small. He looked broken. My mother was holding him, weeping. Julian was nowhere to be found. He had fled the moment the reality of the situation hit, unable to face the destruction he had caused. I walked in. I didn't take off my coat. I didn't offer a hug. The boy who wanted to comfort them was gone. The man who had prepared for this was in charge. Get up, I said to my father. He looked at me, confused. Leo, it's over. We lost everything. I said get up. I repeated, my voice steady and cold. Sit at the table. They moved like zombies. My mother looked at me with fear. She had never heard me speak like that. I sat at the head of the table, David's seat. I opened my laptop. I opened the folder. I have been tracking the store's finances for 4 years, I began. I know about the 3 liens. I know about the payroll loans. I know about the mortgage fraud Julian committed with your signature. David went pale. How? How do you know? Because I bought the debt, I said. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush the furniture. I bought the commercial note on the store 6 months ago through a shell company, I explained, not looking up from my screen. And this morning, when the bank moved to foreclose on the house, I triggered a clause in the contract that allowed me to buy out the residential mortgage as a distressed asset. I slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a deed transfer. I own the house. I own the store. The bank is gone. The sheriff is leaving. You don't owe them anything anymore. My mother started to cry, a sound of relief and confusion. Leo, but, the warehouse, you're broke. I own the logistics contract for the warehouse's regional distribution, I corrected her. I haven't worked on the floor in 3 years. I run the supply chain. They looked at me like I was a stranger. And in a way, I was. The son they knew was a quiet, struggling boy. The man sitting before them was a titan they hadn't bothered to notice. Saving them was the easy part. Managing them was the war. I established new rules immediately. I told them that if they wanted to stay in the house, things had to change. I took control of all their finances. I gave them a strict allowance. I cut up their credit cards in front of them. My father struggled the most. He was a proud man, and having his youngest son, the one he had dismissed, suddenly become his landlord and his boss was a humiliation he couldn't swallow. He fought me on everything. When I told him we were digitizing the store's inventory, he yelled. He told me I was ruining his legacy. Your legacy is bankruptcy, I told him, standing in the middle of the dusty store aisle. My legacy is survival. You don't have a vote anymore, Dad. You drove the bus off the cliff. I'm the tow truck. You don't tell the tow truck driver how to do his job. It was cruel. I saw the light go out of his eyes for a moment. It broke my heart. I wanted to be the sweet son who asked for permission, but I knew that if I gave him an inch, he would take a mile and drag us back into debt. I had to be the villain. I had to be the tyrant. I fired the old staff who were stealing from the register. I brought in my own team. I turned the front of the store into a showroom and the back into a fulfillment center for online orders. I used my logistics connections to get better shipping rates than any competitor in the state. The store went from losing $10,000 a month to breaking even in 90 days. Is it better to be loved and watch your family fail, or to be hated and force them to succeed? Where do you draw the line between helping and controlling? 6 months into the turnaround, Julian came back. He looked terrible. He had burned every bridge, owed money to bad people, and had nowhere else to go. He showed up at the store while I was inspecting a shipment. He tried to charm me. He tried to act like the big brother, slapping me on the back, asking how our business was doing. I stopped him. I looked him in the eye. There is no R, I said. There is mine, and you are trespassing. He got angry. He tried to appeal to Mom. Elena called me, begging me to help him. He's your brother, Leo. He has nothing. He has working arms and legs, I told her. If he wants to eat, he can work. I offered Julian a job. Not as a manager, not as a partner, as a janitor, minimum wage, probationary period, You sweep the floors. You clean the bathrooms. You load the trucks, I said. If you are 1 minute late, you are fired. If you ask Dad for a single dollar, you are fired. If you smell like alcohol, you are fired. Julian spat on the ground. He called me a power-tripping psycho. He stormed out, but he came back the next day. He was hungry, and for the first time in his life, he had to earn his keep. Watching my brother scrub the floors of the store he once thought he was too good to run was a turning point. It wasn't about revenge. It was about teaching him the one lesson our parents never did: actions have consequences. For months, he hated me. He wouldn't look at me. But slowly, the work changed him. He started to take pride in how clean the floors were. He started to help customers carry heavy bags without being asked. He stopped looking for the shortcut and started respecting the path. It took 2 years to fully stabilize the family. The store is now the most profitable hardware distributor in the county. My parents are retired. Actually retired, living in a small condo I bought for them near the coast, while I rent out the big family house for passive income. Julian is now the floor manager. He's sober, he's humble, and he actually listens when I speak. But the biggest change wasn't in the bank account, it was in the mirror. I asked myself, how did I become the man who finally did it? I realized that I became that man by killing the boy who needed their approval. For years, I was paralyzed by the desire to be liked by my family. I wanted them to smile at me, to tell me I was good. But you can't save someone if you're worried about them liking you. You can't perform surgery if you're afraid of causing pain. I had to accept that I was going to be lonely. I had to accept that for a long time, the people I loved would look at me with resentment. I had to find my self-worth not in their praise, but in my own competence. I had to learn that true love isn't just a warm hug. Sometimes, true love is a stern no. It is a locked door. It is a strict budget. It is the strength to hold the line when everyone else is begging you to fold.